This 4K documentary explores the entire history of Japan, from its ancient origins and the rise of powerful clans, through the tumultuous era of samurai and shogunates, to the modern age of innovation and global influence. If you enjoyed this journey through time, please like, share your favorite historical moment, and subscribe for more captivating documentaries. Long before the gleaming skyscrapers and neon-lit streets of modern Tokyo, before the samurai's gleaming armor and the imperial court's refined poetry, the islands of Japan lay shrouded in mist and mystery. These islands, scattered across the vast Pacific Ocean, have long been a land of enigma, where myth and history intertwine like the ancient cedar forests that blanket its mountains. The origins of Japan, both geographical and cultural, invite us to peer into a distant past where the foundations of a great civilization quietly took root. Japan's archipelago consists of 4 main islands: Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, and Shikoku, along with countless smaller islets. This geographic isolation, separated from the Asian mainland by the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea, created a natural barrier that both sheltered and shaped the evolving societies within. It is this isolation that fostered a unique cultural trajectory, one that would blend influences from the continent with indigenous traditions, crafting a civilization unlike any other. Yet, how Japan transformed from scattered tribal bands into a unified nation remains a profound question that echoes through its ancient chronicles. The earliest human presence in Japan dates back tens of thousands of years, but it is the Jomon period, spanning roughly from 14,000 BCE to 300 BCE, that marks the dawn of a distinctive culture. Named after the characteristic cord-marked pottery they left behind, the Jomon people were primarily hunter-gatherers, living in harmony with the dense forests and abundant rivers. Their pottery, some of the oldest in the world, was not merely utilitarian but also artistic, adorned with intricate patterns that hint at a rich spiritual life. These early inhabitants built pit dwellings and formed small, semi-permanent settlements, demonstrating a deep connection to their natural surroundings. Yet, the Jomon culture was but a prelude to a more transformative era. Around 300 BCE, a significant wave of change swept across the islands with the advent of the Yayoi period. It was during this time that rice cultivation took hold, brought by migrants likely from the Korean peninsula or China. The introduction of wet rice agriculture revolutionized Japanese society, enabling larger and more stable communities to flourish. With the capacity to produce surplus food, social hierarchies began to emerge, and the seeds of political organization were sown. Iron and bronze tools, as well as new pottery styles, accompanied these agricultural advances, reflecting a society in dynamic transition. The shift from the Jomon's hunter-gatherer lifestyle to the agrarian Yayoi culture was not merely economic. It was a profound social upheaval. Villages grew into larger settlements, and clan-based societies started to consolidate power. The importance of rice transcended sustenance. It became a symbol of wealth, status, and spiritual significance. The ritualistic aspects of planting and harvesting rice would later intertwine with Shinto beliefs, underscoring the sacred bond between the people and the land. This period laid the groundwork for the hierarchical structures that would dominate Japanese society for centuries. Japan's early development, however, was not isolated from the rest of East Asia. The Korean peninsula and the Chinese mainland served as crucial conduits for cultural and technological exchange. Bronze and iron tools, sophisticated weaving techniques, and even early forms of writing filtered into the islands, enriching native traditions. Such interactions were often complex, involving both cooperation and conflict, yet they undeniably accelerated Japan's social evolution. Amid this burgeoning complexity, the question of political unification began to surface. The fragmented clans, each led by chieftains asserting control over their territories, gradually gave way to more centralized forms of governance. The Yamato clan, emerging in the Kofun period that followed the Yayoi, would claim descent from the sun goddess Amaterasu, establishing a divine legitimacy that reinforced their authority. This mythic lineage not only elevated the clan status but also laid the spiritual foundation for the imperial institution that survives to this day. The early centuries of Japan's history are, therefore, a tapestry woven from the threads of myth, migration, and adaptation. The island's geography both isolated and protected these communities, allowing them to forge a distinctive identity while selectively absorbing continental influences. The transition from the Jomon's nomadic bands to the Yayoi's agricultural villages marked a turning point, setting Japan on a path towards state formation and cultural flourishing. Yet, much about this ancient era remains cloaked in uncertainty. Archaeological discoveries continue to shed light on the lives of these early peoples, but the absence of written records from the period leaves many questions unanswered. How did these disparate groups interact? What spiritual beliefs guided their daily lives? And how did the early rulers justify their claims to power in a landscape still dominated by nature's vastness? As we journey deeper into Japan's past, these mysteries beckon us onward. The islands, once home to hunter-gatherers threading their way through primeval forests, would soon witness the rise of powerful clans and the birth of an imperial tradition that would endure through millennia. The story of ancient Japan is one of transformation, of a land shaped by isolation and connection, by myth and history, and by the indomitable spirit of its people. In this nascent world, where the mountains whispered ancient secrets and the sea carried the echoes of distant lands, the foundations for a remarkable civilization were quietly laid. The tale of Japan's ancient origins is not merely a chronicle of dates and artifacts. It is a saga of human resilience and cultural genesis, a prologue to the epic history that would follow. As the centuries unfolded, the foundations laid by Japan's earliest inhabitants began to evolve into more complex social and cultural structures. The transition from the Jomon period's hunter-gatherer existence to the Yayoi period's agrarian way of life marked not only a shift in subsistence but a profound transformation in the very fabric of Japanese society. The Yayoi era, spanning approximately from 300 BCE to 300 CE, stands as a pivotal chapter in Japan's ancient history, an era that witnessed the birth of agriculture, technological innovation, and the emergence of early village communities that would shape the nation's destiny. The hallmark of the Yayoi period was, without question, the introduction and widespread adoption of wet rice agriculture. This revolutionary practice, believed to have been brought to the Japanese islands by immigrants from the Korean peninsula or mainland China, transformed the landscape and the people's relationship to it. Rice paddies carved into the fertile plains required irrigation and coordinated labor, fostering communal cooperation and new social hierarchies. The ability to cultivate surplus food led to population growth and the formation of permanent settlements, a stark contrast to the more mobile lifestyle of the Jomon people. Alongside agriculture, the Yayoi culture introduced significant technological advances that accelerated societal development. The advent of metalworking, particularly bronze and iron, allowed for the creation of more effective tools and weapons. These innovations not only improved farming efficiency but also altered the balance of power among emerging clans and communities. Pottery, too, underwent a transformation during this period. The simple cord-marked designs of the Jomon gave way to more refined and functional ceramics, often unadorned, reflecting a utilitarian focus aligned with agricultural life. With these material changes came profound social shifts. The once relatively egalitarian hunter-gatherer bands gradually gave way to stratified societies, where power began to concentrate in the hands of local chieftains or clan leaders. These figures wielded authority not only through military strength but also through control of agricultural resources and religious rites. The importance of rice extended beyond sustenance. It became a symbol of wealth, fertility, and divine favor, reinforcing the leader's legitimacy. The social fabric of Yayoi Japan was thus woven with threads of economy, religion, and emerging political power. Village life during the Yayoi period centered around these agricultural communities. Archaeological excavations reveal that settlements were often fortified with moats and earthen walls, suggesting a need for defense and hints at interclan conflicts. Houses were constructed with wooden pillars and thatched roofs, arranged in organized patterns that point to planned community layouts. These emerging villages were the crucibles from which more complex political entities would eventually arise. The Yayoi people's spiritual world also began to take shape during this era. While much remains unknown about their religious beliefs, the significance of natural phenomena such as the sun, moon, and seasonal cycles is evident. These elements would later crystallize into Shinto, Japan's indigenous faith centered on kami, spirits believed to inhabit natural objects and forces. The agricultural calendar, with its rituals tied to planting and harvest, imbued the landscape with sacred meaning and reinforced the communal bonds necessary for survival. Importantly, the Yayoi period did not unfold in isolation. The Japanese archipelago remained connected to the broader cultural currents of East Asia. Through trade, migration, and occasional conflict, ideas, technologies, and customs flowed into Japan from the continent. The introduction of wet rice farming itself was part of this complex exchange. Bronze mirrors, iron tools, and other artifacts found in Yayoi sites bear striking resemblance to those of contemporary Korean and Chinese cultures, underscoring the dynamic interactions across the sea. Yet, despite these external influences, the Yayoi people adapted foreign elements to fit their unique environment and social realities. The island's rugged terrain and scattered geography necessitated localized adaptations, and the cultural identity that emerged was distinctly Japanese. This synthesis of imported innovation and indigenous tradition set the stage for the formation of more centralized political structures in the centuries to come. As the Yayoi period progressed, the seeds of early state formation began to sprout. Powerful clans extended their influence over larger territories, consolidating resources and forging alliances through marriage and military might. Social stratification intensified, with the emergence of an elite class that commanded labor and controlled agricultural production. These developments foreshadowed the rise of the Yamato polity, which would claim dominance in the succeeding Kofun period. The agricultural revolution also had demographic consequences. With food surpluses enabling population growth, communities expanded and diversified. The increased human presence altered the landscape, accelerating deforestation and the transformation of wetlands into cultivated fields. This environmental impact, while enabling societal progress, also introduced new challenges and vulnerabilities that communities would have to navigate. Throughout this era, the everyday lives of the Yayoi people were marked by the rhythms of the land and the seasons. The planting and harvesting of rice dictated social calendars, ceremonies, and labor cycles. Artifacts such as polished stone tools, lacquerware, and jewelry hinted a society that valued craftsmanship and aesthetic expression alongside survival. These material cultures provide glimpses into the aspirations and identities of a people forging their place in a changing world. Yet, amid these advancements, the Yayoi period was not free from conflict. The need to defend fertile lands and resources likely fueled rivalries among clans, leading to skirmishes and the erection of defensive structures. Such tensions reveal the fragile balance between cooperation and competition that characterized early agrarian societies. The interplay of alliance and antagonism set patterns that would resonate through Japan's feudal history. In sum, the Yayoi period represents a watershed moment in Japan's ancient story, a time when the island's inhabitants embraced new ways of life that would ripple through the centuries. The introduction of rice farming, metal tools, and social stratification transformed disparate communities into organized villages and clans, laying the groundwork for emerging political entities. This era's blend of innovation, adaptation, and cultural synthesis forged the foundations upon which Japan's complex civilization would be built. As we trace the arc of Japan's early development, the Yayoi period stands as a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. From the muddy paddies tended by countless hands to the fortified villages nestled among hills, these ancient people shaped their world with determination and vision. Their legacy, etched in pottery shards and settlement ruins, whispers across millennia, inviting us to understand the origins of a nation that would one day command the world's attention. The dawn of the Kofun period, beginning around the 3rd century CE, heralded a new chapter in Japan's ancient history, one marked by the emergence of powerful clans and the nascent stirrings of early statehood. Named after the distinctive burial mounds known as Kofun, these monumental tombs rise like silent sentinels across the landscape, testaments to the authority and ambition of the ruling elite. Within these earthen tumuli, often shaped like keyholes and sometimes spanning hundreds of meters, lay the remains of chieftains whose power extended beyond their immediate domains, signaling a shift toward political centralization that would shape Japan's future. These burial mounds were more than mere graves. They were statements of dominance and symbols of a new social order. The construction of Kofun required vast labor forces and resources, reflecting the organizational abilities of the ruling clans and their control over agricultural surpluses. The mounds were often surrounded by moats and accompanied by grave goods such as bronze mirrors, weapons, and jewelry, artifacts that reveal both the wealth and the cultural connections of their occupants. The scale and distribution of Kofun across the archipelago mapped the expansion of influence by the emerging Yamato polity. The Yamato clan, which would lay claim to imperial lineage, began to assert supremacy during this period, gradually uniting disparate clans under its banner. Their ascendancy was not solely based on military might but also on the consolidation of religious and cultural authority. They traced their descent from the sun goddess Amaterasu, weaving a divine legitimacy that reinforced their political claims. This mythic ancestry was foundational, intertwining governance with spiritual sanction in a manner that would endure in Japanese imperial ideology for centuries. The Kofun period also witnessed increasing contact and influence from neighboring civilizations, particularly from the Korean peninsula and China. These interactions introduced new technologies, ideas, and cultural practices that were eagerly adopted and adapted by the Yamato rulers. Among the most significant was the arrival of Buddhism and the Chinese writing system, which would later revolutionize Japanese society. Although Buddhism's formal introduction occurred in the subsequent Asuka period, The seeds were sown during Kofun times through ongoing diplomatic and trade exchanges. Writing, in particular, marked a turning point. The adoption of Chinese characters enabled the recording of laws, genealogies, and historical events, laying the groundwork for a literate bureaucracy and centralized governance. This literacy was initially the preserve of the elite but would gradually permeate broader layers of society, transforming Japan's cultural landscape. The ability to document and codify customs and decrees was essential for state formation, providing tools for administration and legitimization. Archaeological evidence from Kofun sites reveals a complex society with stratified classes. At the apex stood the ruling aristocracy, supported by a warrior class that would evolve into the samurai in later centuries. Below them were farmers, artisans, and laborists, whose toil sustained the social hierarchy. The emerging political order was characterized by a delicate balance of power among allied clans, with the Yamato clan exercising primacy but relying on alliances and marriages to maintain cohesion. The political structure of this early state was still fluid and decentralized compared to later periods. The Yamato rulers governed through a network of regional chieftains, each controlling their territories while acknowledging the suzerainty of the central authority. This arrangement allowed for a degree of local autonomy but also sowed the seeds of future conflicts as clans vied for greater influence. The role of kinship and lineage was paramount, with familial ties underpinning alliances and succession. Religion and ritual played a critical role in legitimizing power during the Kofun period. The Yamato rulers employed Shinto practices, venerating kami associated with natural phenomena and ancestral spirits. These rites were not mere superstition but integral components of governance, reinforcing the divine status of the ruling family and the social order they upheld. The construction of shrines and sacred sites during this era reflects the intertwining of political and spiritual authority. The influence of continental culture extended beyond religion and writing to encompass art, architecture, and technology. Bronze mirrors found in Kofun tombs, often imported or fashioned after Chinese designs, symbolize both status and the transmission of aesthetic ideals. The introduction of iron tools and weapons enhanced agricultural productivity and military capabilities, solidifying the Yamato clan's dominance. These technological imports were adapted to local needs, blending foreign innovation with indigenous tradition. Diplomatic relations with Korean kingdoms such as Baekje and Silla were pivotal during the Kofun period. These ties facilitated the exchange of goods, people, and ideas, enriching Japan's cultural and political milieu. Envoys and immigrants brought new skills, including advanced metallurgy, weaving, and governance models. However, these relationships were not without tension, as rivalries on the peninsula sometimes spilled over into Japan, influencing internal dynamics. The Kofun period's political and cultural developments set the stage for the formalization of imperial institutions in the centuries to follow. The Yamato rulers' efforts to centralize control and adopt continental systems of governance culminated in the establishment of the Japanese imperial state. This period of consolidation was marked by both cooperation and conflict among powerful clans, as the balance of power shifted and new alliances were forged. Yet, despite the advances, the early Japanese state remained fragile and contested. The vast archipelago's geography imposed limits on centralized administration, and local chieftains retained significant autonomy. The Yamato rulers' authority depended on their ability to negotiate power relations, manage rivalries, and uphold religious legitimacy. These challenges underscored the complexities of state formation in a land marked by both isolation and connection. As the Kofun period drew to a close, the stage was set for transformative changes that would reshape Japan's political and cultural landscape. The introduction of Buddhism and the codification of laws in the subsequent Asuka period would accelerate centralization and cultural synthesis. Still, the legacy of the Kofun era, the monumental tombs, the assertion of imperial lineage, and the blending of indigenous and continental influences, remains a cornerstone of Japan's ancient heritage. In reflecting on this era, one perceives a society in flux, balancing tradition and innovation, local autonomy and emerging central authority. The silent mounds that dot the countryside speak to the ambitions of rulers who sought to unite a fragmented land beneath a divine mandate. Their story is etched not only in earth and stone but in the enduring institutions and myths that continue to define Japan's identity. The Asuka period, unfolding from the mid-6th to the early 8th century, stands as a transformative era in Japan's history, a time when the islands were swept by waves of religious, political, and cultural change that would redefine the nation's identity. It was during this period that Buddhism first took root, arriving from the Korean peninsula and China, and with it came a profound challenge to indigenous beliefs and the established order. The introduction of this new faith did not merely add a spiritual dimension. It ignited a revolution in art, governance, and philosophy that echoed through the centuries. The arrival of Buddhism in Japan is shrouded in both historical record and legend, yet its impact is undeniable. Traditionally dated to 552 CE, when the king of Baekje sent a gilded Buddha statue and sutras as gifts to the Yamato court, Buddhism posed a profound challenge to the native Shinto faith. While Shinto revered the kami, the spirits of nature and ancestors, the Buddhist doctrine introduced concepts of karma, enlightenment, and salvation, offering a new framework for understanding life and death. This foreign religion found patronage among ambitious rulers, who saw in it a means to bolster their authority and unify the realm under a shared spiritual vision. The adoption of Buddhism was not immediate nor uncontested. Early opposition came from powerful clans who viewed the new faith as a threat to traditional practices and their own influence. Yet, over time, the Yamato rulers, particularly Prince Shotoku, emerged as ardent supporters. Prince Shotoku, a regent and statesman, is celebrated for championing Buddhism and promoting its ethical teachings as a foundation for good governance. His 17-article constitution, promulgated around 604 CE, articulated a vision of a centralized state guided by Confucian and Buddhist principles, emphasizing harmony, justice, and respect for authority. The Taika reforms of 645 CE represented a watershed moment in the consolidation of imperial power and the transformation of Japan's political landscape. Inspired by Chinese models, these reforms sought to centralize authority by abolishing the hereditary control of land by powerful clans and instituting a system where all land was declared the property of the emperor. This radical reorganization aimed to strengthen the imperial court's control over resources and administration, laying the foundation for a bureaucratic state. The reforms introduced new taxation systems, legal codes, and administrative divisions, reflecting a profound shift towards centralized governance. The establishment of a written legal code marked another critical development during this period. Drawing heavily on the Chinese Tang dynasty's legal structures, Japan began compiling its own codes, which combined indigenous customs with imported Confucian ideals. These laws codified social hierarchies, land tenure, criminal offenses, and court rituals, providing a framework for governance that extended beyond personal rule to institutional authority. The creation of these codes represented not only political reform but also cultural assimilation, as Japan selectively adapted continental models to its unique context. Buddhism's influence extended far beyond politics. It inspired a flowering of art and architecture, as temples and monasteries sprang up across the land. The construction of Horyuji, one of the world's oldest surviving wooden structures, stands as a testament to the era's religious devotion and artistic achievement. Buddhist iconography, sculpture, and painting introduced new aesthetic forms, blending native and continental styles in ways that enriched Japan's cultural tapestry. These sacred sites became centers of learning and spiritual practice, fostering the spread of Buddhist teachings among the elite and common people alike. The fusion of Buddhism with native Shinto beliefs created a uniquely Japanese religious landscape. Rather than supplanting the indigenous faith, Buddhism often coexisted and intertwined with it, leading to syncretic practices that honored both kami and Buddhist deities. This blending reflected the pragmatic adaptability of Japanese spirituality, where religious traditions were integrated rather than rejected, allowing for a complex and layered worldview. Confucianism, too, played a significant role during the Asuka period. Imported alongside Buddhism, Confucian ideals provided ethical guidance for rulers and officials, emphasizing loyalty, filial piety, and social harmony. These principles were instrumental in shaping the emerging bureaucratic state, underpinning the legal codes and reinforcing the hierarchical order. The synthesis of Buddhist compassion and Confucian duty created a moral framework that guided governance and society. The political landscape of the Asuka period was marked by both ambition and intrigue. The central court sought to extend its influence over regional clans, often through strategic marriages, alliances, and military campaigns. Rivalries among powerful families, particularly between the Soga and Mononobe clans, played out against the backdrop of religious contestation, with the Soga supporting Buddhism and the Mononobe defending traditional Shinto practices. The eventual triumph of the Soga clan facilitated Buddhism's establishment, but also foreshadowed the complex interplay of politics and religion that would characterize Japan's history. Diplomatic missions to the continent intensified during this time. Japanese envoys traveled to Tang China and Korean kingdoms to study governance, culture, and religion, returning with texts, artisans, and ideas that enriched the imperial court. These exchanges fostered a cosmopolitan atmosphere in the capital, as Japan sought to position itself within the broader East Asian world. The capital city of Asuka became a hub of innovation and cultural fusion, reflecting the dynamic spirit of the era. The Asuka period's reforms and religious transformations laid the groundwork for Japan's subsequent cultural and political development. The emergence of a centralized state under imperial authority, supported by codified laws and a bureaucratic system, marked a decisive break with the more fragmented societies of earlier periods. Buddhism's integration into the fabric of Japanese life brought new ethical and artistic dimensions, while Confucian ideals provided a framework for social order. Yet, the period was also one of tension and transition. The adoption of foreign ideas required negotiation and adaptation, as Japan balanced innovation with tradition. The contest between religious factions, the struggle for political dominance among clans, and the challenges of governance in a diverse archipelago underscored the complexities of state building. These dynamics would continue to play out in the centuries ahead, shaping the destiny of the Japanese nation. In this crucible of change, the seeds of Japan's imperial identity were sown. The Asuka period stands as a testament to the transformative power of cultural exchange and political vision, a time when the islands, emerging from their ancient past, stepped onto a broader stage, embracing new ideas while forging a distinct path. The legacy of this era resonates in the enduring institutions, beliefs, and artistic achievements that define Japan's historical journey. The dawn of the Nara period, stretching from 710 to 794 CE, marked a defining moment in Japan's early statehood, a period when the fledgling imperial court sought to cement its authority through the establishment of a permanent capital and the flourishing of culture and governance modeled in large part on continental precedents. The choice to found Heihokyo, present-day Nara, as the first permanent capital was a deliberate assertion of centralized power, signaling Japan's ambition to craft a sophisticated, enduring state rooted in law, religion, and history. Heihokyo was conceived as a microcosm of the Chinese Tang capital Chang'an, with its grid-like streets, grand palaces, and ceremonial precincts. This urban planning reflected not only aesthetic ideals but also a cosmological order, embodying Confucian and Buddhist principles that link the emperor's rule to universal harmony. The capital became the heart of political administration, religious life, and cultural production, drawing aristocrats, monks, artisans, and scholars into its bustling confines. Central to the Nara period's identity was the consolidation of Buddhist institutions. Buddhism, having taken root in the previous Asuka period, now blossomed into a dominant force shaping both spiritual and political spheres. Grand temples such as Tadaiji rose with imposing wooden structures and colossal bronze statues, epitomizing the era's religious devotion and the state's patronage. The Great Buddha of Tadaiji, a towering figure nearly 15 meters high, symbolized not only faith but also the imperial court's power and its role as protector of the realm. The growth of Buddhist monasteries extended beyond religious function. These institutions became centers of learning, scriptural study, and artistic innovation. Monks played crucial roles as advisors to the court, diplomats, and keepers of knowledge. The fusion of religion and governance reinforced the legitimacy of the emperor's rule, intertwining spiritual authority with political command in a manner that would endure in Japanese history. Literature and historical writing also flourished during the Nara period, fueled by the adoption of Chinese writing systems and the imperial court's desire to document and legitimize its rule. The compilation of works such as the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki represented monumental efforts to record Japan's myths, genealogy, and early history. These texts not only preserved oral traditions but also constructed a narrative that linked the imperial family to divine origins, reinforcing their sacred status. The Nihon Shoki, completed in 720 CE, stands as a particularly significant chronicle, detailing the origins of the Japanese people, the deeds of emperors, and the introduction of Buddhism. Written in classical Chinese, it reflects the court's aspiration to present Japan as a civilized, cultured nation on par with its continental neighbors. These historical records served both as political tools and as cultural touchstones, shaping Japanese identity for centuries. The Nara period also witnessed the continued refinement of legal and administrative systems. The Ritsuryo codes, building upon earlier Taika reforms, codified laws governing land ownership, taxation, and social ranks. This bureaucratic framework aimed to centralize authority under the emperor, regulating the complex relations between the court, provincial governors, and local communities. Officials were appointed based on rank and merit, reflecting Confucian ideals of governance. Despite these efforts at centralization, the Nara court faced significant challenges. The vast distances and mountainous terrain of Japan's archipelago limited effective control over distant provinces, where local clans often retained considerable autonomy. This tension between central authority and regional power foreshadowed the political fragmentation that would later characterize Japanese history. Moreover, the court's reliance on Buddhist institutions sometimes led to conflicts of interest, as temples amassed wealth and influence that rivaled secular authorities. Economically, the Nara period was marked by agricultural expansion and the development of trade networks. The state implemented land surveys to assess and tax rice production, which remained the cornerstone of the economy. Markets and artisan guilds grew within and around the capital, fostering urban culture and material prosperity. However, the rigid social hierarchy imposed limitations on mobility and innovation, with peasants and labourists bound to their roles within the system. Artistically, the Nara era contributed to the maturation of Japanese aesthetics through the synthesis of continental and indigenous influences. Sculpture, painting, and architecture reflected Buddhist themes, employing techniques and styles imported from China and Korea but gradually adapted to Japanese sensibilities. The era's artifacts, from lacquerware to silk textiles, reveal a courtly culture attentive to refinement and symbolism. The imperial court itself was a complex arena of politics and culture, dominated by powerful noble families whose influence shaped policy and succession. The Fujiwara clan, in particular, began to rise during this time, positioning themselves through strategic marriages and court appointments to become kingmakers in later centuries. Court life was marked by elaborate rituals, poetry recitals, and the cultivation of refined manners, laying the groundwork for the aristocratic culture that would flourish in the subsequent Heian period. Religious syncretism continued to evolve, as Shinto and Buddhism coexisted and interwove in practices and beliefs. The state promoted Shinto as the native faith tied to the imperial lineage, while Buddhism offered a universal salvation that complemented indigenous spirituality. This duality created a rich tapestry of religious life, influencing festivals, rites of passage, and governance. The role of women in Nara society, especially within the aristocracy, was notable. Women of the court engaged in literary pursuits, religious activities, and political maneuvering. The period's poetic and prose works often reflect their perspectives, revealing a nuanced understanding of courtly life and personal expression. Diplomatic relations with the Asian continent remained vital during the Nara period. Envoys continued to travel to Tang China, bringing back knowledge of administrative practices, art, and religion. These missions reinforced Japan's place within the East Asian cultural sphere, even as the islands maintained their distinct identity. The flow of ideas and goods shaped the development of Japanese institutions and culture. Yet, beneath the surface of cultural efflorescence and political ambition, challenges lingered. The cost of maintaining the capital, temples, and bureaucracy strained state finances. Natural disasters, epidemics, and internal power struggles tested the resilience of the court. The tension between idealized central authority and practical governance underscored the complexity of building a unified state in a diverse and rugged land. The Nara period, therefore, stands as a moment of both achievement and transition. It laid the foundations for Japan's imperial system, codified its history and laws, and fostered a vibrant cultural and religious life. At the same time, it revealed the limits of centralization and the enduring influence of regional powers. The era's legacy is etched not only in the majestic temples and ancient texts, but in the ongoing interplay of tradition and change that would define Japanese history. In the unfolding narrative of Japan, the Nara period shines as a beacon of statecraft and cultural synthesis, a time when the island's ancient past converged with continental innovation to shape a civilization poised for new horizons. The dawn of the Heian period in 794 CE marked the beginning of an era often regarded as the pinnacle of classical Japanese culture, a time when the imperial court moved its seat from Nara to Heiankyo, modern-day Kyoto, and embarked upon a distinctive path of aristocratic refinement and political transformation. This relocation was more than a mere change of address. It symbolized a deliberate break from the influence of Buddhist monasteries in Nara and an assertion of imperial autonomy. The Heian court cultivated an exquisite culture of poetry, art, and ceremony that would leave an indelible mark on Japan's identity, even as political power quietly began to shift away from the emperor toward emerging noble families and warrior clans. Heiankyo was meticulously planned with broad avenues and orderly grids, mirroring the Tang dynasty's capital but gradually evolving into a uniquely Japanese urban center. The city became a stage for imperial pageantry and courtly life, where aristocrats engaged in the elaborate rituals and aesthetics that defined the era. These nobles, especially those of the Fujiwara clan, who rose to dominate court politics, wielded influence not only through official positions but also through strategic marriages that tied them to the imperial family itself. The Heian period is renowned for its flowering of literature and the arts, emblematic of a society deeply attuned to elegance and subtlety. It was within this milieu that Japan's literary masterpieces were born, most famously The Tale of Genji, penned by Lady Murasaki Shikibu. This sprawling narrative, often hailed as the world's first novel, delves into the intricate lives of court nobles, weaving themes of love, power, and impermanence with poetic sensitivity. Alongside prose, poetry thrived in the form of waka, short, evocative verses that captured the fleeting beauty of nature and human emotion. The composition and exchange of poetry became a central aspect of courtship and communication, reflecting the era's refined sensibilities. Despite the cultural efflorescence, the political landscape of the Heian period was marked by a gradual decline in direct imperial authority. The emperor, while revered as a divine figure, increasingly ceded power to the Fujiwara regents who controlled the government through their influence over imperial succession. This system of cloistered rule allowed the Fujiwara clan to dominate administrative affairs, while the emperor often retired to monastic life, retaining religious prestige but limited political clout. This shift signaled a move toward aristocratic oligarchy within the capital. Beyond the confines of Heian-kyo, the burgeoning samurai class quietly gained prominence. Initially serving as provincial warriors and enforcers for aristocratic families, these mounted elites would eventually come to wield significant military and political power. The court's inability to effectively govern distant provinces led to the rise of regional warlords, or daimyo, who established their own power bases. This decentralization foreshadowed the complex feudal dynamics that would dominate Japan in later centuries. The social order during the Heian period was rigidly stratified, with the court aristocracy at the apex, followed by provincial officials, warriors, peasants, artisans, and merchants. While the capital basked in cultural pursuits and political maneuvering, much of the rural population led lives shaped by agriculture and local customs, largely removed from the court's refined world. The gap between the center and periphery grew, contributing to the eventual weakening of centralized control. Religion during the Heian era reflected the intricate interplay between native Shinto beliefs and the increasingly sophisticated forms of Buddhism imported from the continent. Esoteric sects such as Tendai and Shingen gained favor among the aristocracy, emphasizing rituals, mysticism, and the pursuit of enlightenment through complex ceremonies. Temples associated with these sects became centers of learning and spiritual authority, sometimes rivaling the court in influence. The blending of Shinto and Buddhist practices created a rich spiritual tapestry that permeated art, literature, and daily life. The Heian period also witnessed advancements in the visual arts and architecture. Courtly tastes favored delicate painting styles, often illustrated in hand scrolls that accompanied literary works, as well as refined calligraphy that was considered a mark of education and elegance. Architecture in Heian-kyo reflected a graceful simplicity, with palatial complexes and temples designed to harmonize with the natural surroundings. Gardens, too, were carefully crafted to evoke poetic imagery, embodying the aesthetic ideals of the time. Despite the seeming tranquility and cultural brilliance of the capital, underlying tensions simmered. The aristocracy's preoccupation with courtly life often came at the expense of effective governance, leaving the provinces vulnerable to disorder. The emergence of warrior clans in the countryside, some originally hired by nobles to protect estates, began to challenge the established order. These samurai families amassed power through martial skill and alliances, setting the stage for future conflicts. Within the court itself, factional rivalries and intrigues were common, as noble families vied for influence over the emperor and succession. The Fujiwara's dominance, while extensive, was not absolute, and other clans sought to assert their own positions. The delicate balance of power was maintained through a complex web of marriages, patronage, and political maneuvering, underscoring the era's sophistication and fragility. Education and literacy flourished among the aristocracy, especially among women, who played pivotal roles in the cultural life of the Heian court. Women's diaries, poetry, and novels provide invaluable insights into the era's social dynamics and aesthetic preoccupations. Their writings reveal a world attentive to nuance, emotions, and interpersonal relations, contrasting with the more overt political concerns of men. Trade and economic activity during the Heian period remained largely localized, with limited foreign exchange compared to earlier eras. The court's isolationist tendencies and focus on internal matters contributed to a distinct cultural identity, though contact with Korea and China continued through diplomatic missions and the flow of ideas. The Heian period, thus, stands as a paradoxical age of both cultural splendor and political decentralization. While the imperial court dazzled with poetry, art, and ceremony, the true locus of power gradually shifted away from the emperor toward aristocratic families and provincial warriors. This duality shaped the trajectory of Japanese history, as the elegant veneer of court life concealed the brewing forces that would soon reshape the nation. In this era of refined beauty and subtle power plays, Japan's identity crystallized into forms that resonate to this day. The Heian period's legacy is etched not only in its literary masterpieces and artistic achievements, but also in the complex social and political structures that set the stage for the rise of the samurai and the eventual transformation of the Japanese state. The Kamakura period, beginning in 1185 CE, marked a profound turning point in Japanese history, the birth of the samurai as the dominant force shaping the nation's political and social landscape. The establishment of the Kamakura shogunate under Minamoto no Yoritomo ended centuries of aristocratic court rule, ushering in Japan's first military government and inaugurating a new era where warrior elites held sway over the islands. This seismic shift transformed not only governance but also culture and society, embedding the ethos of the samurai deep into the fabric of Japan. The rise of the Kamakura shogunate was the culmination of a prolonged struggle between competing clans, chiefly the Minamoto and Taira families, whose rivalry had erupted into the bloody Genpei War. Minamoto no Yoritomo's victory in 1185 and his subsequent appointment as shogun by the emperor in 1192 formalized the transfer of power from the court aristocracy to the military class. Though the emperor remained a revered figurehead in Kyoto, real authority now resided with the shogun and his warrior government based in Kamakura, a coastal city far removed from the traditional capital. The establishment of this military government represented a new political order, one grounded in martial prowess, loyalty, and land stewardship. The samurai class emerged as the ruling elite, their status derived from military service and the control of estates granted by the shogunate. This feudal structure fostered a hierarchical society where vassalage and personal bonds of loyalty, between lord and retainer, became the cornerstone of governance. The samurai's code of conduct, bushido, emphasizing honor, discipline, and loyalty, took shape during this period, forging an enduring warrior ethos. The Kamakura shogunate developed institutions to administer its rule, including a council of elders and military governors, shugo, appointed to oversee provinces. These officials ensured the shogun's authority extended beyond Kamakura, managing land disputes, collecting taxes, and maintaining order. The bakufu, or military government, operated alongside the imperial court, creating a dual power system that characterized much of medieval Japan. This balance was often fraught with tension, but it allowed the shogunate to consolidate control over the increasingly fragmented archipelago. One of the defining moments of the Kamakura period was the defense against the Mongol invasions in 1274 and 1281. The Mongol Empire, under Kublai Khan, launched massive fleets to conquer Japan, threatening to uproot the nascent military government. The samurai warriors of Kamakura rose to the challenge, fiercely resisting the invaders in battles along the coasts. Yet, it was the timely arrival of typhoons, later immortalized as the kamikaze, or divine winds, that devastated the Mongol fleets and safeguarded Japan. These events not only cemented the samurai's reputation as defenders of the realm but also instilled a sense of divine protection that would resonate in national consciousness. The Kamakura period also witnessed profound cultural developments influenced by the samurai's values and the tumultuous times. Zen Buddhism gained prominence among the warrior class, appealing through its emphasis on meditation, discipline, and direct experience. This form of Buddhism fostered a spiritual resilience and simplicity that complemented the samurai's austere lifestyle. Zen's influence extended to art such as ink painting, tea ceremony, and garden design, embedding a contemplative aesthetic that shaped Japanese culture for centuries. Literature during the Kamakura era reflected the complex realities of the time. The rise of military tales, or Gunki Monogatari, recounted the exploits and heroism of warriors, blending history and legend. These narratives celebrated samurai valor and loyalty while grappling with themes of impermanence and fate, resonating with a society accustomed to conflict and change. Such works helped define the samurai identity and provided moral exemplars for generations. Despite the shogunate's military foundations, governance required more than force. The Kamakura rulers sought to legitimize their authority through law and administration, codifying land rights and legal procedures. The establishment of the Joei Code in 1232, a legal code addressing property disputes and samurai conduct, was a significant step toward institutionalizing the rule of law within the feudal framework. This legalism underscored the shogunate's efforts to maintain order amid the complexities of land tenure and vassal relationships. The samurai class, while dominant politically and militarily, also influenced social structures and daily life. Their presence in the provinces transformed local communities, as warrior households became centers of power and economic activity. The cultivation of rice and management of estates were intertwined with military obligations, linking agriculture to governance. The samurai's role as both warriors and administrators exemplified the multifaceted nature of Kamakura society. Yet, the Kamakura shogunate was not without internal challenges. Factional disputes within the Minamoto lineage and among influential families occasionally threatened stability. The shoguns themselves often balanced competing interests, navigating alliances and rivalries to maintain authority. Moreover, the duality of power between the shogunate and the imperial court persisted, creating a political tension that would endure in various forms. The Kamakura period's legacy is profound. It established the samurai as the ruling class, embedding the ideals of Bushido into Japan's cultural DNA. The military government's institutions laid the groundwork for subsequent shogunates that would govern Japan for centuries. The defense against the Mongol invasions became a defining narrative of national resilience, while the cultural flowering under Zen Buddhism shaped artistic and spiritual traditions. In the broader sweep of Japanese history, the Kamakura era represents the moment when warrior power supplanted aristocratic rule, ushering in a feudal age characterized by loyalty, honor, and martial valor. It is a story of transformation, of clans rising from provincial obscurity to national prominence, of a society adapting to new challenges, and of a culture forging a path that would echo through the ages. The Muromachi period, spanning from 1336 to 1573, unfolds as an era of both cultural renaissance and political fragmentation, a time when the Ashikaga shogunate held sway yet struggled to maintain centralized authority amid the rise of regional warlords. This epoch witnessed the flowering of arts and spiritual practices that would define Japanese aesthetics for centuries, even as the land was increasingly torn by internecine conflict, setting the stage for the protracted Sengoku, or warring states, period. The Ashikaga shogunate, established by Ashikaga Takauji in 1336 following the fall of the Kamakura regime, relocated the seat of military power to Muromachi in Kyoto, hence the period's name. While the shoguns nominally ruled over Japan, their control was far from absolute. The decentralized nature of governance meant that powerful daimyo, regional lords, commanded substantial autonomy within their domains. These daimyo maintained private armies of samurai and often engaged in rivalries and warfare to expand or defend their territories, leading to a fracturing of national unity. Despite the political turbulence, the Muromachi period is celebrated for a remarkable cultural efflorescence. Zen Buddhism, which had gained prominence in the previous Kamakura era, deeply influenced the arts and philosophy of the time. Zen's emphasis on meditation, simplicity, and naturalness resonated with the warrior class and aristocracy alike, permeating disciplines such as the tea ceremony, chinoyu, calligraphy, ink painting, sumi-e, and garden design. These art forms prized subtlety and understatement, reflecting a profound aesthetic rooted in impermanence and the beauty of the natural world. The tea ceremony, refined under masters like Sen no Rikyu, evolved into a ritual embodying harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. This practice transcended mere social occasion, becoming a spiritual discipline that encapsulated Zen principles. Similarly, no theater emerged during this period as a highly stylized form of drama blending music, dance, and poetry. Patronized by the samurai elite, no explored themes of suffering, redemption, and the supernatural, employing minimalist staging and slow, deliberate movements to evoke emotional depth. Ink painting flourished as well, with artists such as Sesshu Toyo bringing Chinese techniques to new heights within a Japanese context. These monochrome landscapes and portraits captured the essence of subjects with economy of brushstroke, embodying the Zen ideal of conveying profound meaning through simplicity. Gardens, too, were designed as contemplative spaces, using rocks, water, and plants to create miniature natural worlds that invited meditation and reflection. Yet, beneath this vibrant cultural milieu, political stability remained elusive. The Ashikaga shogunate's authority waned as internal strife and external pressures mounted. The Onin War, 1467 to 1477, a devastating conflict sparked by succession disputes within the shogunate and rivalries among daimyo, plunged Kyoto into chaos. The city was reduced to ruins, and central governance collapsed, ushering in the Sengoku period, a century of near-constant warfare marked by shifting alliances and the rise of powerful regional lords. This era of fragmentation saw the emergence of iconic figures such as Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, whose later efforts would ultimately reunify Japan. But during the Muromachi period itself, the political landscape was one of volatility and decentralization. The shogunate's inability to impose order allowed local warlords to entrench their power, fortifying castles and building armies in preparation for conflict. Trade and economic activity during this time reflected the complexities of the period. Despite warfare, commerce prospered in certain regions, with the growth of castle towns, jokomachi, serving as centers of economic and cultural life. Merchant classes expanded, facilitating the exchange of goods such as silk, ceramics, and weapons. Notably, contact with European traders and missionaries began in the mid-16th century, introducing firearms, Christianity, and new technologies, further complicating the social fabric. Religious life in the Muromachi period was multifaceted. While Zen Buddhism influenced the elite, popular Buddhism flourished among common people, with sects such as Pure Land Buddhism offering accessible paths to salvation. Shinto practices continued alongside Buddhism, often blending in syncretic rituals. The period's spiritual diversity reflected Japan's complex social realities. The architectural legacy of the Muromachi period includes the construction and refinement of castles, which became both military strongholds and symbols of daimyo authority. These fortifications evolved from simple wooden structures to imposing stone complexes, strategically located to control territories and trade routes. Castles not only served defensive purposes but also functioned as administrative centers, fostering the growth of surrounding towns. Amidst the cultural achievements and political upheaval, the Muromachi period's social fabric was marked by tension. The samurai class, while dominant militarily, faced challenges in maintaining order and loyalty amid shifting allegiances. Peasants and townspeople navigated a world of uncertainty, often caught between competing powers. The era's conflicts caused widespread suffering but also stimulated innovations in governance and military tactics. In sum, the Muromachi period stands as a paradoxical age of artistic brilliance and political disintegration. The Ashikaga shogunate's twilight gave rise to a rich cultural legacy rooted in Zen aesthetics, while the fracturing of central authority plunged Japan into a century of warfare and transformation. This complex era set the stage for the eventual unification under the successors who emerged from the Sengoku chaos, shaping the course of Japan's history in profound ways. The echoes of Muromachi's artistic and spiritual innovations continue to resonate, embodying a vision of beauty and impermanence that contrasts with the era's turbulent politics. The period's legacy is a testament to Japan's capacity to cultivate refinement amid discord, forging a cultural identity that endures beyond the vicissitudes of power and conflict. The Azuchi Momoyama period, spanning the latter half of the 16th century, stands as a dramatic and turbulent chapter in Japan's history, a time when centuries of fractious conflict gave way to ambitious efforts at unification under visionary leaders. The names Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi resonate through the ages as architects of transformation, wielding unparalleled military prowess and political acumen to bring an end to the chaotic Sengoku warring states era. Their campaigns not only reshaped the political landscape but also ushered in unprecedented cultural and technological exchanges, marking a decisive turning point for Japan. Oda Nobunaga emerged from obscurity to become a formidable warlord whose innovations and ruthlessness revolutionized warfare and governance. His strategic acumen was matched by his openness to new ideas, including the adoption of firearms, introduced by Portuguese traders in the mid-16th century, which he integrated effectively into his armies. Nobunaga's forces wielded arquebuses with devastating impact, challenging the traditional dominance of swordsmanship and cavalry, and altering the nature of samurai combat forever. The Unification campaign was marked by decisive battles, political intrigue, and calculated alliances. Nobunaga's capture of Kyoto in 1568 symbolized his ascendancy, yet his ambitions extended beyond the capital. He systematically subdued rival daimyo, employing both military might and diplomacy to consolidate power. His boldness was tempered by a vision to modernize Japan's political structures and economy, fostering commerce and weakening the entrenched power of Buddhist monasteries that had long wielded military influence. Following Nobunaga's unexpected death in 1582, his successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, continued the quest for unification with equal fervor. Rising from humble origins, Hideyoshi's ascendancy epitomized the fluidity of the period's social order. Through military skill and shrewd political maneuvering, he extended control over much of Japan, imposing order upon a fractured land. Hideyoshi's policies went beyond conquest, He implemented sweeping reforms aimed at stabilizing society and centralizing authority. One of Hideyoshi's most significant initiatives was the sword hunt, a campaign to disarm the peasantry and prevent rebellion by confiscating weapons. This decree solidified the samurai class's exclusive right to bear arms, reinforcing the emerging feudal hierarchy. Additionally, Hideyoshi conducted comprehensive land surveys to assess and regulate agricultural production, ensuring a reliable tax base to support his administration and military. The period also witnessed the construction of grandiose castles that symbolized the newfound centralized power and the ambitions of their builders. Nobunaga's Azuchi Castle, perched majestically on a hill overlooking Lake Biwa, broke with traditional designs by incorporating lavish interiors and imposing stone foundations, reflecting both military utility and aesthetic grandeur. Hideyoshi's Osaka Castle further exemplified this trend, serving as a political and cultural hub that projected authority and sophistication. Cultural life flourished amid these political upheavals. European contact introduced not only firearms but also Christianity, which found converts among some daimyo and commoners. The Jesuit missionaries brought new ideas and technologies, fostering a complex exchange that enriched Japan's cultural tapestry even as it sowed seeds of future conflict. Trade expanded, with ports opening to foreign merchants, facilitating the flow of goods such as silk, spices, and firearms. Art and architecture absorbed these influences, blending native traditions with novel motifs. The tea ceremony reached new heights under masters like Sen no Rikyu, whose emphasis on simplicity and spiritual depth resonated with the era's tumultuous spirit. This ritual became a microcosm of the period's aesthetic sensibilities, balancing grandeur with restraint. Hideyoshi's ambitions extended beyond Japan's shores. In 1592 and again in 1597, he launched invasions of the Korean peninsula, aiming to conquer the Asian mainland and establish Japanese dominance. These campaigns, costly and ultimately unsuccessful, embroiled Japan in protracted warfare, straining resources and provoking fierce resistance from Korean and Chinese forces. The invasions underscored the limits of Hideyoshi's power and foreshadowed the challenges that would confront his successors. Nonetheless, the Azuchi Momoyama period's legacy lies in its role as the crucible of Japan's unification and modernization. The military innovations, administrative reforms, and cultural flowering established patterns that would shape the Tokugawa era to come. The period's leaders, though often ruthless, laid the foundations for a centralized state capable of enduring peace and prosperity. The era's dramatic contrasts, between brutal warfare and refined culture, between openness to foreign influence and assertion of Japanese identity, reflect the complexities of a nation in transition. Nobunaga and Hideyoshi's efforts to unify Japan ended centuries of fragmentation, yet their legacies carried both promise and peril, setting the stage for the eventual emergence of the Tokugawa shogunate. In this crucible of ambition and change, Japan transformed from a land of warring fiefdoms into a nascent empire, poised to embark on a new chapter of political stability and cultural achievement. The Azuchi Momoyama period story is one of visionary leadership, fierce struggle, and the forging of a national identity that would endure through the centuries. The Edo period, commencing in the early 17th century under the Tokugawa shogunate, ushered in an era of unprecedented peace and stability that would endure for over 2.5 centuries. The Tokugawa family, having emerged victorious from the tumultuous Sengoku period, established their seat of power in Edo, modern-day Tokyo, and imposed a rigid social order and isolationist policies that profoundly shaped Japan's political, cultural, and economic landscape. This prolonged peace, known as the Pax Tokugawa, allowed urban centers to flourish and arts to blossom, even as the country remained cautious of foreign influence. At the heart of the Tokugawa regime was a meticulously maintained hierarchy that placed the samurai class at the apex, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants. This social order was codified and enforced through laws and customs designed to preserve stability and prevent the resurgence of civil war. The samurai, while no longer engaged in constant warfare, served as bureaucrats and administrators, their martial role transforming into one of governance and cultural leadership. The rigid caste distinctions limited social mobility but fostered a sense of order and predictability throughout the archipelago. The Tokugawa shogunate's policy of sakoku, or national seclusion, effectively closed Japan's borders to most foreign contact from the 1630s onward. Trade and diplomatic relations were restricted to a few select partners, notably the Dutch and Chinese, confined to designated ports such as Nagasaki. This isolationist stance was motivated by fears of colonialism and the disruptive influence of Christianity, which had spread during the preceding Azuchi Momoyama period but was now suppressed. The shogunate's control over foreign interaction allowed it to maintain political and cultural sovereignty, albeit at the cost of technological and intellectual exchange. Within this insular environment, Japan's cities grew rapidly. Edo itself swelled into one of the world's largest urban centers, with a population exceeding 1 million by the 18th century. The rise of castle towns and commercial hubs fostered a vibrant urban culture that blended traditional Japanese aesthetics with new forms of entertainment and commerce. The merchant class, though ranked lowest in the official hierarchy, accumulated wealth and influence, patronizing arts and contributing to the era's cultural dynamism. Cultural developments during the Edo period were remarkable in their diversity and innovation. Kabuki theater emerged as a popular form of dramatic entertainment, characterized by stylized acting, elaborate costumes, and dynamic storytelling. Ukiyo-e, woodblock prints depicting scenes from history, theater, and everyday life, became widely accessible, spreading art beyond the elite to the burgeoning middle classes. These prints not only entertained but also documented contemporary society with vivid detail. Literature flourished as well, with genres such as haiku poetry reaching new heights through masters like Matsuo Basho. Haiku's brevity and evocative imagery captured the essence of nature and human experience, reflecting the period's aesthetic values of simplicity and transience. The proliferation of printed books and the rise of literacy contributed to a vibrant intellectual culture, with works ranging from practical manuals to philosophical treatises. Economically, the Tokugawa era saw significant growth in agriculture, commerce, and industry. Advances in farming techniques increased productivity, supporting population expansion. Markets and trade networks within Japan became more sophisticated, facilitating the distribution of goods and fostering regional specialization. Despite the official restrictions on foreign trade, clandestine exchanges, and the import of limited goods introduced new technologies and ideas that slowly permeated society. The arrival of Commodore Matthew Perry's fleet in 1853 shattered Japan's long-standing isolation. Perry's show of naval power compelled the Tokugawa shogunate to open ports to American and European vessels, initiating a period of intense internal debate and upheaval. The forced treaties and unequal trade terms exposed the shogunate's weaknesses and sparked nationalist movements advocating for restoration of imperial rule and modernization to resist foreign domination. This crisis culminated in the Meiji Restoration of 1868, ending the Tokugawa shogunate and ushering in a new era of rapid modernization and westernization. Yet, during its existence, the Edo period's legacy of peace, cultural richness, and social order profoundly shaped Japan's national character. The arts, urban life, and economic structures developed in this time laid the groundwork for Japan's emergence as a modern nation-state. The Tokugawa era's balance of tradition and control, isolation, and internal dynamism presents a complex portrait of a society striving to preserve stability while nurturing creativity. Its enduring influence is evident in Japan's cultural heritage and historical consciousness, marking it as one of the most distinctive periods in the archipelago's long and storied past.